Hi, this is Frederick from the techno label Detroit, Berlin. This is the third episode of my game-changing gear series, and today we're going to take a look at what I think is the most important piece of gear in all my setup. We're going to talk about the Elektron Analog Rytm. I have the MK1, the Mark 1, and they came on the market with a second version, the Mark 2, which has a few features more than the Mark 1, being its ability to sample from an external input and the ability to resample and some other very interesting stuff. You can put samples inside the Mark 1, but it's over the computer, so when you want to record something, you have to record it, you have to process it in your DAW, you have to make samples from it, and then you can, via a program, it's kind of a slow connection, but you can move the samples to the machine, and that way you can layer each of the analog engines with a sample engine. To go over the machine in a quick manner, you have the pads, you have 12 of them, and actually some of them share the same output, so you have 8 outputs. This means the bass drum is on one, snare drum on the second, rimshot and clap share the third output, then you have the bass tom, the low tom, the mid and the high tom also share a channel, the hi-hats, both of them open and closed, share a channel, and the cymbal and the cowbell also share an output. What you can do is turn down the volume of the analog engine and just use samples. So you can put anything you want on any pad you like. You have trigger values, you have the synth engine, have the sample engine, then you have a filter. You can do a band pass, a notch, a high pass, a low pass, all kinds of filters with of course some resonance and their envelope generator. Then you have the amplifier with its envelope generator and an overdrive. You can pan it, you can change the volume of course. You have two LFOs. Then you have the setup menu, a delay section, a reverb section. They both have high and low pass, feedback, all kinds of other parameters which are common for delays and reverbs. You have a distortion section, a compression section, and the second LFO. You get mutes, so you can mute each channel if you like. You have a chromatic mode. You can select one of the 12 sounds and play it chromatically. Then you got the scenes, and the scenes is kind of a snapshot. You have a performance mode and a scene mode. The performance mode, when you go to the performance mode, you can use it like a modulation wheel just by adding pressure. You can change some parameters, you can totally program it. So I have now a hi-hat loop going, and what I'm doing is modulating the reverb signal on those hi-hats. So let's play it, and when I apply pressure, you hear the reverb being added or going to the default setting by adding or releasing pressure on the pads. It's very expressive, and it's a very nice way to implement some changes while playing live. That's extremely nice about this device, is that when you're playing live you have all these kind of tools at your fingertips, and to do some stuff it's only 1 or 2 clicks away. It's very direct and it's very performance oriented. Let me stop the loop. If you ask me, or if you say you can have one device from your studio and that's it, I would choose the Analog Rytm from Elektron. For me, it's invaluable. It changed my workflow. Actually, it's the sound of my artists' aliases on Detroit Berlin, Motec, Rogue Unit, some cooperations, some remixes. I always use the Analog Rytm. It's not only a drum computer, because it's a drum computer, but you can do extremely nice things with it. What I like most on the Analog Rytm, and I know the analog engine is very great, the synth engine for all the sounds, but what I like the most is the sample engine. It's kind of limited, but in its limited way I can really push myself to really get great results by minimalism. And I have something programmed in here from a project I did a while ago. Actually, they're samples from NASA. They put them online a few years ago, some years ago. They put those samples online, and I wanted to do a whole project just with the samples only from NASA. I took them apart in the drum computer. I used it to mess about with the samples, and I have a whole album of inspiring music just made with the Analog Rytm on its own. I added a couple of synths, maybe a couple of patches on the modular system, but it's the only tool in my toolbox where I can use it to complete a track, structure-wise, sound-wise, mix-wise to some degree, because I always record it in Logic or Ableton to process it a little bit further, to mix and balance it and master it, maybe do some structural changes when necessary. But when I have this device, I just take it with me and I can create a track from start to finish. Also, what I want to mention, the newer version, I don't think they sell the old version anymore. On the second-hand market you can find them. Probably not that cheap because they're highly wanted. The new version, it's about 1500 euros, I think. I will put a link in the description below. Check it out, it's an amazing device. When I started out, I wanted a drum computer and I bought the machine drum, which is the kind of predecessor for the Analog Rytm. It's a completely digital drum machine, 12-bit, so not exactly high-end in sound, but very distinct. And the way they work with all the parameters you can lock and just the sequencing, which is a very strong point of the Elektron machines, the machine drum. It took me about 2 years to wrap my head around it. It's not an easy device. Especially the workflow, it's like nothing you experienced before. Of course, now because they're so well known and companies steal from each other, they borrow ideas and they implement stuff that's great about some devices, like the machine drum, the DIGITAKT. When they were released, they were very difficult to get started with because the learning curve, it's very steep. It took me 2 years, I think about 2 years, before I actually started using the machine drum in a very simple way. If I look back, when I got the Analog Rytm, it didn't take me a week before I kind of figured out how the machine was laid out, what its functions were. Of course, it took some time to perfect the way I play with the machine, but all in all, it didn't take me that long. For new users, I also think the Analog Rytm is more intuitive and easier to get into than the older devices like the first DIGITAKT, even the Mark II DIGITAKT, because it's kind of the same. And the machine drum and older Elektron devices. If you want to start with Elektron devices, I would suggest the DIGITAKT, maybe the digitone, but I think the DIGITAKT will be a very suitable device. It's about half of the price of the Elektron Analog Rytm Mark II. So it also has the sample function. It's a digital engine, but in its own regard, it's a very nice, it's a small device. I would highly advise an Elektron machine. They're incredible. It's my go-to device when I want to start a project. In no time I have something great going on. Loaded a patch from the project with the NASA samples. I can perhaps have the hi-hat going. Let's see. I will first delete it and go over some sounds. So let's see. I think the bass drum is an analog engine. Actually, if you press the synth engine, track select bass drum, you go on to the bass drum and you see the level is high. On the snare also, rim shot and clap. When you go to the sample engine, you see the sample engine's volume is low on the clap, high on the rim shot. So I combined the analog and the sample engine. Snare drum also, the level is kind of halfway, and the kick is just the analog kick. Sometimes it's better, sometimes I just take a sample and tweak the sample. A lot of the times I lower the sample's pitch so that it gets a little bit crunchy. Now I'm on the kick, I will go to the synth engine, put the volume all the way down, choose a sample. Let's go through some of the samples.
Discovery, your goal for APU shutdown on time. Discovery. Discovery 4 computer. Discovery, roger, no problem.
So you can hear the samples are kind of low quality.
Discovery, roger, no problem. Discovery. Discovery, roger, go for deploy. Space Shuttle Discovery still on its way to orbit.
Let's take this.
Space Shuttle Discovery.
Let's create a 4 to the floor kick beat. Play it, and then I'm going to mess around. It directly sounds interesting, but let's continue. Okay, and then the filter. So we have an atmosphere going on. Okay, let's just take this, see what's on the snare. It's a very flat snare, I don't like it. Okay. What I like to do, I have the kick, I have the snare. Maybe the snare is a little bit too loud. Okay, so what I want to do is create like a bass line, and let me hear what the bass sounds like right now. Okay, so we have the synth engine is silent and the sample engine what I like to do for bass lines, and I did it in this batch, is I like to put the sample on loop and take a very small part of the sample. So a very short section, so when it loops it's kind of like a wave shape, and that way it's like a synthesizer voice because it's always looping, and yeah, it sounds a little bit wave shape like-ish. So let's see, maybe chromatic mode. Okay, let's go. By moving the start and stop point, you can scan through the waveform of the sample. Okay, let's adjust the envelope. Okay, I can change the frequency of the sample, I can lower the volume, I can change the filtering, all with these parameter locks. So let me tweak some things. always saving when you have something nice going on. Let's see the rim shot. Also, you can record the parameter changes, so and I always mostly start with one bar loop. Can actually have 4 bars in a sequence, in a pattern. Just press the page button and then you can change it to 32, 48, 64, but you can also take divisions. You can change it between the different tracks, so you have polyrhythms going on. Let me put it on 32. Let me do some parameter changes, recording some parameter changes. Or what I can do is assign an LFO to the parameter, and you can do so on every sound. You have actually 2 LFOs, so you have plenty of modulation options. And yeah, a few of my friends said I kind of make my analog rhythm sound a little bit like a modular synthesizer, because the way how it always seems to be moving, and yeah, it reminds them of how I use a modular synthesizer sounds and how I make my analog rhythm sound. So let's choose a destination for the LFO, and it will be under the amp section, the hold time. So by modulating a few things, you can make something sound really, yeah, alive. When you have just a very flat groove going on that just repeats and repeats and repeats, it sounds so boring. And what I've experienced is with the analog rhythm. There are also other machines, drum machines, that do this. You have so many options to make something. You have so many options to make something not sound sterile. So now it's doing some polyrhythms with the hi-hats. I made a 24 bar, 24 16 notes loop, so a bar and a half. So it will do something different. Let me see. Okay, so I have both hi-hats on the 24/16, so bar and a half loop, and then the rest is just going 32/16 notes, 2 bars. So let's play a little bit further along with what is going on. Some vocals, NASA samples. few polyrhythms going on. The bass with the kick and the snare and the bass sound, they went for 30 to 16 notes, 2 bars, and then I put the master on 64 16 notes, 4 bars, and the last instruments I added to the track are actually triggered once in these 4 bars. So when I change like the kick, I can just change it. Let's go to the kick. We have the 2 bars going. Actually, yeah, what I can do, let's see. I'm just going to leave it at that. Do some scenes. I have 3 scenes pre-programmed. It's from an older project, so I'm just going to first save my kit because I did some changes and I like it this way. I will see what the scenes are about, but because there are 3 scenes lighting up in blue, it means that there's something programmed, so I can engage them and disengage them to see how it affects the sound. Can't hear that much difference. Let's go over the performance. So this one is really crunching it. I used to put any kind of parameters anywhere, but lately I've been keeping some pads just for delay, reverb, so that I know from patch to patch what they mean, because there's nowhere written on them what they do. And if you go playing live performances, and when you go playing live performances and you have a patch from a year ago, half a year ago, 2 years ago, you won't remember and you won't go into the menu looking on the screen what it's changing. So now I mostly use some pads just for effects and some pads to change the sound. The bass drum I'm mostly like do a high pass or low pass or a distortion or something that I know when I hit the performance pad on the bass drum sound will change and it will always fit with the song. So I never got confused that the same pad is affecting the cowbell sound and vice versa. So just to keep some oversight, I have my ways, and if you have an analog rhythm, you will certainly come up with your own ways. But what I like to do is keep things simple, and yeah, keep things on their own respective paths. I could put vocals on the cowbell, for example, but these are sounds that aren't that standard use in my productions, so I know these sounds can be anything, but the hi-hats will always be hi-hats or some sound that can act like a hi-hat where the frequency is in the highs, bass sound frequency in the lows, or something that can act as a bass sound like a low tom, rimshot, claps. Not necessarily they have to be rimshots or claps, but their function is some kind of reminiscent to some claps. So when I put samples in there, I know which places they will go, and I will keep kind of a structure that will continue when you go through various patches. There's rhythm, bass drum, snare drum, etc. But if you put a clap sample on the bass drum sound, if you forget about it and you're doing a live performance and you hit the bass drum thinking that it will be a bass drum and you hear a clap, you're kind of screwed. So if you're in the studio and you're just working on tracks, even then I think it's better to have some kind of way of working and be consistent. Consistency is doing your workflow a big favor. So if you have a lot of chaos, even I have sometimes chaos and I forget about things, and in the end you'll come across the things you forgot about, you don't know what they are, and it's sometimes you lose inspiration that way, or just the energy to work on something. If you open a project and it's total chaos, even just for your own sake, if you work, you need to have a workflow. Let's say you put a track in the fridge for over a year, you reopen the project, you think, oh, this sounds great, I want to work on it, and you start working on it, and in the next 5 minutes you get extremely frustrated by not being able to see what you were doing a long time ago, and you just lose interest in the project. That would be a pity, because it will be kind of a loss. If it sounds good, the groove is good, you want to continue it, but your creativity gets crushed because your workflow is extremely chaotic, then some people like this way, I don't. Sometimes I'm a little bit chaotic, but it's even then in kind of a structured way. So you have a project, you have a sample library, and you have to put samples in a sample pool to use in different kits in your project. So you have a project. In the project you have 8 banks of 16 patterns. You have 128 samples to use in kits and stuff. You can save 128 kits, drum kits per project, and you can have, if I'm correct, 128 projects in total. So these 128 can actually have 128 kits, 128 samples. So if you do the math, it's a lot. Let's do a little set with the analog rhythm from Elektron and see how it goes. I will probably start with some tracks muted. It's a very simple but effective way in doing some structuring building up some things, and you can do a lot with only the mutes. Combine it with the performance mode, the scenes and the chromatic mode, and you have a real powerful tool in your hands. So let's just jump right into it, and yeah, I hope you enjoy this little session I will do. So I hope you enjoyed this little set. Yeah, don't know what else to say about this machine other than it's been a blessing to have this in the studio. I do almost everything music-wise on this machine. I really like the sample capabilities, being to put samples in here. The MK2 you can directly sample into the machine, the MK1 not, so you have to use a computer. It's a little bit cumbersome, but yeah, once they're in there you can do really nice stuff with them. So I would say give it a try. If you're in a store and they have an Analog Rytm Mark II or a DIGITAKT, give it a try. It can greatly improve your workflow and it's extremely fun to mess around with it, to play with it. It's extremely versatile when it comes to making techno music. You can add some swing, accents, everything that a drum machine should have. You can do with the Analog Rytm. So if you have some experience with an Elektron machine, put it in the comments below. What kind of electron machine you have or you have used in the past and the thing you like most of it. I think this concludes this episode. What I would like to say is, if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please do so. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, yeah, sorry for wasting your time. Please hit the bell button if you want to be notified when new videos will get published. And I would say thank you for watching and see you next time.